relative fit on a child is so much more than hopefully what you thought about this morning, and it's so much more important because to me, all right, you might think I'm a bit dramatic, I think it's life-changing. So part of my research as well was to not just get the data on what we need in terms of frames, but to understand more about the face and how it develops, so that we can kind of, you know, learn more and understand it more. So if I chop this lovely little baby into thirds, so I'm going through the mouth, bottom third, I'm going mouth to pupils, middle third, and then the top third. Which third do you think develops first? Well, this is like top, middle, or bottom, isn't it?
Yeah.
Top, middle, or bottom? Bottom.
Bottom.
Any advance on bottom?
Middle.
Middle. Oh,
Right.
yeah, one of you's right. So top's the first thing to develop because of the brain. Yeah. So the brain is the driver for the whole of the bodily development. So that's the first thing that happens. And that's why when you see the scan photos of babies, they have got an abnormal large head, and especially an abnormal large top third of the head, because that brain has to develop first. So we know quite a lot about the sutures and the skull formation that protects the brain, but that develops pretty much straight away. Which one's next? Middle or bottom?
Bottom.
Bottom? Why?
Through knife action of feeding.
That's it. So as soon as you're born, the brain says, oh, you've got to survive. You need to eat. So the next third to develop is from the mouth down to the jaw, and that continues to develop until about the age of 25, when the molars appear, sorry, the wisdom teeth appear, and you know, that's fully developed then. What about this middle third then? What do you think we know about that?
Third.
That's third. Well done.
Got that one right.
I wouldn't say it develops much.
Babies breathe through them.
We do. Yeah, we do. The answer is we don't know hardly anything about that middle third. And do you know why? Because the only people that are interested in it is us, because we want to put a point on it. So there's quite a lot of research into constructing the nose, reconstruction, surgeries, accidents, and that sort of thing. But actually, how these tissues and cartilage develop from birth is quite an unknown art, really, because nobody's interested, apart from me.
Plastic surgeons, would they have a more knowledge or?
Not really. They know at what point they can intervene and do reconstructive surgery, because a lot of them they can't. But that middle third, it's an absolute unknown. Rhinoplastic surgeons, it's all about once the face is developed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of children, they won't do surgery until that face is fully developed. Yeah. So a lot of my children I see here have craniofacial synostosis, which means that their skull is prematurely fused in one area. So it gives them a very unusual head shape. And again, they won't really surgically correct that because of the affecting the growth plates and all of that. But I think it's quite fascinating, really. But what we do know is that babies are born with hardly any bearing surface. It's incredibly low. And if you look here, the bearing surface is here on this little boy. That's a negative crest. It's below that lower lid. So straight away, if I was dispensing him, I would be looking for a bridge set below that midline. So we do know that. Yeah. For example, you can be my glamorous assistant, something like this. So, I mean, have you seen the Owens World range before? So
I've heard about them.
Okay, so these are typically marketed at children with Down syndrome. So incredibly small niche market, designed by a parent who couldn't find any specs to fit their child. As I was saying to Saskia, the reason why we don't dispense many of these, and these fit all children really well because it's so low on the bridge. and it's got a nice rounded top, extended lug, etc. And you can adjust the side, you can chop that down, whatever you want. But why don't we dispense many of them?
Because they look ugly.
Yeah, they look upside down. If you've got a child, especially a child with Down syndrome, they don't want to look any different.
No.
And no, you put that on any child, it fits the Chinese bridge lovely as well. They're going to think, well, why am I made to look different from anyone else? I've got enough challenges as it is. But as I was saying to Saskia, the pad position of this frame is perfect.
Just sits below.
And it's nothing to do with that brace bar. It's not even attached. I'll pass it around so you can see. So there is no reason they couldn't manufacture this frame with that brace bar at the top, so it looks like a typical frame. But the pad position is what makes it fit, and that is independent of that bar. Yeah, have a look. But it's a really good example of what we're saying about balancing fashion with actual fit and just trying to mask what we need and making it look like a typical frame. Good, isn't it?
Is that manufactured just as, I hate to say the word normal, as a normal frame, but just split trimmed?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
What they did was they just identified that children with Down syndrome have an incredibly low crest, and they have things like, well, I'll show you later what I found, but they have wider head widths, but they have a shorter length bend.
Yeah.
So basically they flipped it, and to me it just smacks of I'm different.
Yeah.
They don't want to be different.
No.
They just want to be normal. Right. So timeline then of a child. I have to pay her every time I use these images now because she's now 21 and very savvy. But I think it's really clear to see that at 12 months old, you can see the light change on the bearing surface. Can you see that with the light in this room? It's not great, but you see the bearing surface here.
Yeah.
She's about a -5 at 12 months old, and that's quite typical. Look at the size of her apical radius.
Yeah.
We were saying, weren't we?
Yeah.
You chose the smaller end of
Yeah.
the scale, whereas her apical radius is about 14 now. Her DBRs are absolutely massive. Okay, so they're in excess of 25-30 mil, and her frontal angles are really, really wide and low, and so is her splay angle going out there. It's massive, and nothing really changes. Very slowly in different areas, but nothing really changes until about the age of 4, where you start to see that prominence. You start to see the nasal bones erupting from the face there. And once the nasal bones have formed and you get the cartilage changes after that. But you'll see even at 4 and at 6, it's still quite wide. It's still a big apical radius. And look at her crest now. It's virtually in line with her lower lid. So that's telling us that we need a negative bridge position in the younger ages. Then we start to get to the mid position. And then you'll see as they age, everything narrows, everything lifts. So look again from here, look. And then look compared to there. So here, her bearing surface is now way above the top of her lower lid. And I would suggest, I think, to answer your question earlier, that for typically developed white British girls, and that's important, that around this kind of 13, 15 age group, they will start to fit an adult scale frame. But certainly not before then, not if we're talking absolutely properly. So girls start their peak facial change growth at 10.5. We know that, that's in the literature. And they end it about, they're going to peak and then they end it about 14.5, 15. Where do you think boys are?
A lot later.
Behind, 2 years behind. So this is why I'm saying these are not only typically developed children, but boys start off with larger parameters, but their growth is so much slower and so much more delayed. So the data doesn't show any main gender differences because they're both developing at different periods in their life. But yeah, you can certainly, I think, definitely see the angles all narrow, the apical radius narrows, everything lifts up as that nasal bone takes a more prominent position. So therefore the projection moves back as well. So the sweep of the lashes isn't so much an issue because they're sitting well behind that bearing surface.
Alicia, may I ask one question? This one has spring hinges.
Yeah.
Is this good or not good? Because you cannot make any pressure, or is it You prefer it.
I don't mind sprung hinges as long as the head width and temple width is set to what they should be, because I think a sprung hinge is good for a knock, and children will invariably have knocks and bangs, and if it will spring and give back, that's great. But it's not an excuse, which is what it's currently being used for not thinking about how to fit the frame in terms of the head width and temple width. So people think, oh, it's got a sprung side, that's great, that'll help it stay on. But actually, they need to fit them properly and use the spring just as a feature that stops it, you know, getting knocked out of shape, rather than a fitting feature. So the short answer is yes, I do like sprung sides, but as long as you can adjust them as well. Cool, that was a long-winded answer, wasn't it? We've had a look at that. So how I did my research then, first of all, I wanted to show that it wasn't just me. So this problem wasn't just me at all. So I did, first of all, a questionnaire back in 2015 now to all GOC registrants, that's all optometrists and dispensing opticians. And I got almost 700 responses, which is quite good for a questionnaire. The majority were DOs because they got a lot more to say than optometrists. And I asked them about who do you use, why do you use them for particular age ranges, and is there anything people should stop making? Is there anything, you know, particular ranges are good for, etc. So I've got quite a lot of knowledge and data of what came back from this. I think what we know and what we've already said today is that the appeal now on kids' frames is amazing. It's absolutely fantastic. They want to wear them. That's a good tick, because that's half the battle. But over 3/4 of people responding said that they felt their frame range was at best average, but the majority scored them poor or dreadful in terms of all of these things. So the size of the frame, the shape of the lens, the position of the bridge, the length of the side, and its ability to be adjusted. So this was kind of giving me the validation, if you like, to go ahead with this project, to understand. And then I gave them a free text box at the end and said, if there's anything you want me to share with manufacturers, what would you want me to say? It's like a therapy session for most of them. But what they said was, stop making small adult designs for children, stop making those rectangular eye shapes where they can look over the top. Yeah, that's a perfect example. You know, that acts like a half eye on a child. So the minute that slips, they look straight over the top. Whereas if that had been rounded, you'd have a little bit more room to play. And stop making those flat, thick side wires, which I would imagine Miranda showed you earlier. Yeah. They're ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, and will cut down your peripheral vision as well. So that's what they said to me. So I thought, that's okay. It's not just me. And so this is what I did with my white British children. I got 883. They were typically developed. And I keep saying that because it does make an impact. So I did have a sample of children with Down syndrome because I do have an interest in these children and I've worked with them quite a few years. And I was really interested in the Chinese bridge. So I did get to go to China and gather quite a few children there.